Rupa Huq.
Thank you, Chair. Did you consult with Opera North on any of all this?
So we didn't consult with any organisation about any other organisation as part of the process.
But about the whole funding envelope, were Opera North consulted? Because, I mean, ostensibly, you know, this should be good news for the North.
So Opera North has actually had an increase in funding in this round.
Opera North in Leeds has had its funding static, and they're furious.
They've actually had an extra £100,000 a year from next year, which is to expand their In Harmony programme into Levelling Up for Culture Place.
I mean, I just wondered if you'd seen okay, that's interesting to know, but there's an editorial in the Yorkshire Post, Paul Fleming, who's the head of equity, says the truth is levelling up is lipstick on a pig of austerity in this case. It's audiences in Yorkshire and workers who will suffer. 70% of organisations facing 100% cut in their funding are actually outside London.
So West Yorkshire, I think you'll find, is actually the area of the country that's achieved the greatest, one of the greatest increases.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a 36% increase in our funding into West Yorkshire from next year, so it's a significant increase across the board. In the north, I mean, you know, demand everywhere was astonishingly high. So even though we didn't in the north have the issues that London had in terms of budget cuts, we still had way more demand than we could meet. We had 440 applications, and we were only able to bring 282 organisations into the portfolio. That's 74 new organisations in the north, and 70 organisations got increases in funding. So I think overall it is a really positive picture for the north, actually.
What about the Oldham Coliseum? They're having 100% cuts.
Yeah, no. No, we don't. And I think it's fair to say we're really supportive of Oldham. Oldham is a Levelling Up for Culture place, and it's one of our priority places. And whilst we're not going to fund Oldham Coliseum, the organisation as it stands, we're aware that the local authority has managed to attract significant investment from Towns Fund to create a new arts centre. And so we've set aside £1.4 million over the next 3 years to work with the local authority to make sure performance continues in Oldham.
I mean, I think the late Bernard Cribbins, who trained there, would be turning in his grave. I mean, a lot of people, Maxine Peake, Julie Hesman-Howard, who trained through that, are furious about that.
I'm not going to argue with the fantastic work that Oldham Coliseum have done in the past, but organisations still have to put a really good application in and convince us they're able to deliver over the next 3 years. And in some instances, they weren't able to do that.
I think sorry to interrupt, if I just to be clear on Oldham, we have ring-fenced the money. It will be invested in Oldham. We working with the local authority, we believe there's a very strong option, but Oldham will not lose out because of that. There's no funding deficit in Oldham because of this.
I mean, can you see why all this does look a bit politically motivated? There was a previous Secretary of State, we spoke to the new one actually this week, who's got a new approach on some matters. It just looks very nakedly political where these cuts have gone.
I mean, I can absolutely assure you that there was no political influence in any of the decisions that we've taken. They were taken entirely, against our strategy, against the instruction that we got from the Secretary of State, and of course, obviously, taking into account the applications that people made to us.
And there will be growth in cities like Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds and Bradford, which are not run by the current government.
I mean, for every pound in the arts, it's kind of up to £8 on local economies, on things like hospitality, transport, builders, things like that. It just looks like a false economy for 100% cut in, 70% of these things are outside London. The headline looks like it's London bashing, but actually there's lots of people outside London who are massively dissatisfied at this.
I think any organisation that has been in the portfolio and is not going to get funded again, of course, is going to be incredibly disappointed, and it's not, these are not decisions that we take lightly. We exist in the sector, we know people in the sector, we know how hard people take it, and we know how worried those people will be. But overall, the picture outside of London is that our investment has gone up almost everywhere.
And I think one of the things that was very important when we talked to people with Let's Create was there are a lot of people who weren't benefiting from organisations that connected through public funding. It's 276 new organisations across the country. That's a real difference. We're going to be taking taxpayers' money, national taxpayers' money, and actually connecting with people in places where there hasn't been investment before. And I do understand and absolutely appreciate for those people who've had it before, it can be shocking and worrying, and I do understand that. But there's a whole group of people, 276 organisations, are getting it for the first time, and for me that's a really important thing. We're benefiting communities, places, groups of people, individual artists who've never had the benefit from public funding. One of the things we learned with the Cultural Recovery Fund, where we actually connected more widely with organisations through public funding than we ever had done before, was there's a whole new world out there. People hadn't made that connection with us, and out of that we've been able to actually bring taxpayers' money to more people and benefit more people, and that's been a big part of what we set out to do with Let's Create. Yeah, I mean, just to say, you know, like South Shields, our investment in South Shields goes up 351%. In Rotherham, it goes up 207%. Barnsley, 184%. Kirklees, 121%. All of these are levelling up for culture places who are going to get significantly more investment than they've ever had for the next 3 years.
I mean, it's also a quality thing as well as a quantity thing, as well as the naked sums on the spreadsheet.
We're not investing in poor quality companies or organisations for work.
Because, you know, people are being expected to do opera from a car park and be grateful for that. People are competing against each other for the crumbs, you know, it's pitting against each other.
I saw some a Ukrainian opera company present in a warehouse in Huddersfield 3 weeks ago, and it was fantastic. It's not the same as Grand Opera, but it doesn't mean it's not good quality.
I mean, look, turning to London, I must thank you for Gunnersbury Park being recognised as a national portfolio organisation. I think nearly 30,000 quid for 3 years. But at the same time, we've got new venues in my seat. There's the Act One Cinema in a former Passmore Edwards Library in Acton, and then there's the Ealing Project venue where Kevin Brennan has trod the boards and entertained the punters before, I know.
The Arts Council grant.
Well, you see, the thing is, these two are not funded by anyone. They're brand new. They are suffering soaring bills, the general post-COVID fall in footfall. Are they ever going to get something like this?
Well,
unlikely, isn't it?
Tonya will be able to speak more.
Gunnersbury Park is a stately home and it's had many hundreds of years of history.
National portfolio funding is only one of our funding programmes.
How are new people going to get a look in?
Sorry, Tonya, you go.
I was just going to say that I think in this portfolio we have really made a big effort to invite new organizations in, because that's the whole thing, is we don't want it to be an exclusive club. Once you get in, that's it, and nobody else can get in. So we're really proud that we've invited 61 new organizations into the portfolio, and we hope in the future, and this is really about following through with Let's Create in terms of that idea of spreading the money outside of central London. And so we have increased.
So I should tell them to apply for the next round, these new guys.
Well, as Pete was saying, though, you know, an NPO is not the only funding route we have. So we have project grants and we have other grants that we give out to organizations. And so many organizations will go from having project grants at different levels and then come into the NPO portfolio. So we do, and we want to build relationships with as many organizations, because we're the development agency and we're developing arts and culture wherever people live and in the ways that we can, using the different funding streams that we have available to us.
And most organisations that have entered the portfolio this time, we would have probably had a funding relationship with them via other routes previously.
In a Radio 4 Front Row programme on the 7th of November, Sir Nicholas Sirota said that's you guys, Arts Council England, decided we should not spread misery around the country. We should identify those companies that could survive a withdrawal. And this is what looks invidious about the ENO and about the Domnar warehouse, which raised eyebrows when that happened. So we had faith that they would have the ability to respond. I mean, the Domnar warehouse has got healthy reserves, and it feels like they're being punished. That's what they've put to me. I was there the other day. Reserves, they're meant to be for a rainy day, for, you know, a risk. And given that, you know, it's quite modest, the income they gain from box office, so they've been prudent. Are they being punished now by you?
So, I mean, first of all, I would say that, you know, reliance or reserves is not something that's in our balancing criteria. So that is not something that we look at. And, you know, we have made, you know, reductions and cuts in London based on a number of criteria and balancing criteria. And you will see some organizations are highly reliant on Arts Council and others are not. So that's not a criteria that we're applying across the board. What I would say is, in terms of making these reductions in the environment that we're in, clearly all organizations will be under financial pressure. And so, in a sense, when we're thinking about trying to make a reduction of 16 million right now immediately, what we have to think of is, and then we also have to think about, as you say, bringing in new organizations. We have to free up enough funding to make the savings and then also bring in new organizations. If we were to apply those cuts equally across all the organizations, we would destabilize the entire sector. The whole London ecology would be destabilized. So we have to make really difficult decisions about organizations that we think, okay, right now it's time for us to change our funding relationship with that organization. They may not be an NPO, but actually we can fund them and work with them in a different way going forward in order to make the savings and to be able to free up budget for new organizations.
Could I just, I'd just say that for the two organisations you mentioned in your constituency, we'd be very happy for our relationship manager to have a conversation with them, and because actually there is a route through. In some parts of the country we have our Creative People and Places programme. That's often where we first have an engagement with organisations and artists. Other places through National Lottery project grants, and there is a journey there. So we'd be very happy to have that. That's part of our role as a development agency.
Okay, the two newbies I'll link up with you.
Please do.
But as for the two big guys, the ENO and the Domhnall Warehouse, do you honestly think the transitional funding of 7 months is adequate for these hundreds and hundreds of staff in well-paid unionised jobs, in the case of the ENO, to find a purpose-built venue, transfer jobs and people, my colleague Jane was saying, all the way across the country, hundreds and hundreds of miles? Is that really realistic?
So for English National Opera, we have a pot already identified of £17 million, and we're having conversations, understanding what that process might be over the next 3 years for them to undergo the change, and we're having that discussion. So already there's £17 million on the table. And I should just say that the money we're investing in the national portfolio in opera and £30 million doesn't include that £17 million for English National Opera. That's totally separate. So that's on top.
Word coming back from the sector is it's not an adequate exit fund. The way this has been done is just brutal. There's not even any soft landing or anything here.
I mean, it is 12 months though, really. So we've given them notice now. Their current agreements don't actually end until the end of March, and then it's a further 7 months. So actually, it is effectively 12 months notice before we ultimately stop funding them. And there will be organisations that are leaving the portfolio that will have to radically reshape their business models. There'll be others who will leave the portfolio who will make a good fist of it through project grants or other programmes. That we have examples in the past of organisations that have carried on reasonably successfully outside of the portfolio, but for some, yes, it'll be very difficult.
I think you've got a lot of convincing of the sector to do that these transitional arrangements are adequate.